Hi, I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, day 4 of the partial government shutdown. Another federal deadline is approaching, and there's still no agreement on Capitol Hill.
I'm Peggy Pico. Also ahead, the political fallout from the government shutdown, what it means to the GOP and Democrats in San Diego. Then,
I some people that give up when you have Parkinson's disease. Keep on living as long as you can.
we talk with the director of the moving documentary film Ride with Larry, screening at this weekend San Diego Film Festival.
And 100 non-actors take to the La Jolla Playhouse stage to tell complete strangers all about themselves and their connection to San Diego. KPBS Evening Edition starts now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. President Obama says the partial government shutdown could be over if Speaker John Boehner would allow a vote to fund the government, but the standoff continues tonight. The GOP says Democrats refuse to negotiate. We get the latest from Jerry Bodlander of the Associated Press.
4 days into the government shutdown, the president took a rare walk to a sandwich shop near the White House that's offering a discount to furloughed workers.
As long as they're off the job, nobody's winning. And that's the point. We should get this over with as soon as possible.
He renewed his call for Speaker John Boehner to let the House vote on a spending bill with no strings attached.
This shutdown could be over today. We know there are the votes for it in the House of Representatives.
Republicans said with the president no longer attending summits in Asia, now is the time for real negotiations.
This isn't some damn game. The American people don't want their government shut down, and neither do I.
House Republicans, meanwhile, keep passing bills to fund certain parts of the government. Senator Ted Cruz sought to win approval in the Senate for some of them, but was rebuffed by Democrats who opposed the piecemeal approach.
So what the junior senator from Texas is doing is picking and choosing those he will allow in the lifeboat.
But the administration now says it supports a bill giving back pay to workers who are off the job. The continued squabbling isn't sitting well with tourists who find museums and other sites shut down.
We're an embarrassment to the world right now. This is America.
And so the shutdown heads into the weekend with no indication a resolution is imminent. Jerry Bodlander, Associated Press, Capitol Hill.
Federal prosecutors are back to work on immigration and drug smuggling cases after a short work stoppage due to the shutdown. The Justice Department actually agreed to restore staff for those cases. Here in San Diego, a red flag warning for dangerous fire conditions remains up for the weekend for most of the county, but the federal shutdown won't hinder firefighting operations. CAL FIRE says U.S. Forest Service firefighters are not being furloughed, and CAL FIRE has placed additional crew as well as engines on duty this weekend. We're expecting strong gusty winds in the valley, mountain, and desert areas. While the blame game continues in Washington, Peggy Pico takes a closer look at the shutdown's political fallout.
Joining me tonight is Steve Nichols, political science professor at Cal State University San Marcos. And welcome, Steve.
Thank you.
Let's start out with this. How much do you think the current political situation in Washington, D.C. Is linked to this federal shutdown?
They're completely linked. The atmosphere is so poisonous and so divided in Washington now within Congress and between Congress and the president that what would normally be routine matters of business grind the whole of government to a halt. So they're inextricably linked.
And we're going to come back to sort of that extremism that seems to be dividing our government. But first, the Republicans suffered a political backlash after the shutdown in the 1990s. Do you think history is going to repeat itself this time around?
Probably. And it's interesting to compare the two. You might think that the Republican Party would have learned a lesson from the 90s and not gone down this road. And there are a lot of similarities between the two situations with the House taking on the president. But at the same time, there are some differences that I think that many in the House think that this is a different situation and they can get a different outcome here.
You had an example of a politician who I believe is from Texas who went to a park that was shut down because of his vote. Tell us what happened.
Well, it was a clip that I saw online, and it was a representative, a Tea Party representative from Texas who was berating a park ranger about the fact that the park that he and others were trying to enter, was a national park, was being closed. And yet his vote to shut down the government was why, and not just his vote, but his vote among many others, was exactly why the park was being closed. It was a tremendous gap between, disconnect between what he had done and the reality of the situation.
And do you think that's something going on with the Republican Party or politicians in D.C. in general, having this disconnect of what they're really doing and the impact on people?
Yeah, I mean, I think that particular incident showed a lack of awareness of the connection between the vote and the closing of the park, but I think that there is a more, and I don't know if that's typical of the GOP generally, but I think there is a belief that the government shutdown isn't that big of a deal. I mean, and there's a position, especially among the Tea Party, that they don't like the federal government anyway, so closing it down in some ways is a point of honor.
How about here in San Diego? Could the Democrats here or the local GOP, could they see any fallout from this division over the shutdown?
Sure. I mean, I think the federal government is a force in America that its shutting down affects every region of the country. Everyone who's employed by it or employed directly, indirectly through it, anyone who depends on its services, which is the vast majority of all of us, we're all going to feel the effects of this thing.
Well, October 17th is the deadline for resolving the debt ceiling. How do you see negotiations proceeding on that? In the same manner, or do you think they're going to be a little bit more cautious in that?
Well, there were some statements from Speaker Boehner yesterday that suggested that perhaps he indicated that he would be willing, at least he was reported to have indicated in private, that he'd be willing to put forward a debt ceiling resolution that allowed for Republicans and Democrats to pass it together, that it wouldn't be linked to defending Obamacare or anything else, which suggested maybe some hope and some optimism that not only a softening of his position on defending Obamacare and continuing government, but the debt ceiling as well. And so it seemed to look like maybe there was some softening there, and then there was a press conference after a closed session this morning that actually seemed to indicate a further hardening of position. So I was optimistic last night. I'm not so much so today.
Who are some of the biggest winners and losers in the political in this shutdown as far as the political fight goes?
It depends on how the fight plays out. I think we're seeing a messaging game, a messaging war right now. And in a sense, the Republicans have the simpler message, the simpler narrative. This narrative of we want to negotiate and the president won't negotiate. I think that resonates with some people who see this as a fight between the two parties and one party wants to come and talk and the other won't. The Democrats' narrative is actually, I think, a little more complicated, that what we're being asked to negotiate is to negotiate away the things we've won in the last two presidential elections through the normal policymaking process.
And a law.
And a law that now exists.
Affordable care is a law. They're saying, oh, disregard this law.
Right.
Who's going to do that?
But there's a couple more steps to that logic that I think might make it harder to resonate. I mean, I think most people look at the shutdown and say the Republicans did this. But.
Okay, we'll close on this. What is it going to take to improve this political extremism in D.C.?
This is the product of forces that have been at work for 20 to 30 years or longer in this country. Partisan sorting, the party is becoming more homogeneous, gerrymandering, a change in the media culture that's inflamed these kinds of things. There's no quick and easy fix to this. If there were, we would already have done it.
All right, political science professor Steve Nichols, thanks so much for your insight.
Thank you.
We told you earlier this week the Miramar Air Show is off because of the shutdown, but the show still went on for some military personnel. The bands American Hitmen and Royal Bliss did a concert for the Marines last night. They were supposed to be performing during the air show. The groups were already on base when word of the cancellation came down, so they offered to do shows at the officers and enlisted clubs. Parts of healthcare.gov will be offline this weekend. That's the national exchange for health insurance. It's getting some glitches fixed. The federal site serves 36 states and ran into technical problems when it launched on Tuesday. Covered California has its own website and got an equipment upgrade earlier this week. The race for cash in San Diego's special mayoral election has kicked off, and it's in high gear now. And it's not just the candidates who are bringing in the big bucks. Independent committees are emerging as major forces in this special election. Joe Girardi with KPBS media partner iNewsSource joins us with another update on the race. Well, first off, Joe, remind us what independent committees do.
Sure. Independent committees are organizations established to engage in political activity, often supporting or opposing candidates for office. They can do most things a campaign can: run ads, conduct polling, dispatch canvassers, so long as they don't coordinate with candidates' campaigns. But unlike a campaign, which must abide by limits on contributions, independent committees can accept unlimited money from corporations, unions, political parties, just about anyone.
Yeah, and that's the big change. So what's their role in the mayor's race?
Sure. Under California law, both campaigns and committees must report any contributions from sources that have given at least $1,000 to them within 24 hours. This is giving us a real-time view of how powerful these independent committees are. Let's start with David Alvarez. He's only raised $73,000 from such donors, way behind Kevin Faulconer and Nathan Fletcher, who've each raised over $250,000 from these guys. But Alvarez has a very powerful independent committee supporting him. It's called Working Families for a Better San Diego. It's sponsored by the Labor Council, and it's raised $620,000 for Alvarez. It's all come from big money contributions from unions and union-related groups. So all of a sudden, Alvarez is way ahead of Faulconer and Fletcher. Now, don't count the other guys out, though. They each have a committee behind them, and you can expect them to start raising big money soon. And if viewers are interested in seeing a searchable database of all these groups' donors, they can go to kpbs.org/follow.
Joe Urardi with KPBS media partner iNewsSource. San Diego is home to more than 2,800 manufacturing companies with products ranging from medical devices, paddle boards to guitars, just to name a few. And this week was deemed Manufacturing Week by the city to encourage folks to take a closer look at the impact of these businesses. About 25% of San Diego's workforce comes from the manufacturing sector, where Taylor Guitars, based in El Cajon, produced 120,000 guitars last year. With 400 employees in San Diego, Taylor manufactures 5 different shapes and 11 different models. The business has struck a positive chord with artists such as Taylor Swift, no relation to the founders, but a big fan of the product.
Taylor Guitars is one of those iconic brands that we have here in San Diego, that if folks know guitars globally, I mean, you and I could be in Europe, we could be in Asia, and if people are really into guitars, they know Taylor Guitars.
Mark Cafferty is with the Regional Economic Development Corporation. Their job is to attract and retain businesses like Taylor in San Diego. He says they're also trying to change the perception of manufacturing from old and messy to clean and efficient.
So when our economy will really become the great economy that I think we all know it can be, it's when we take those great ideas and we put them to market and create the product, and then we distribute it to the rest of the world, and that's when San Diego will start to look like a very different place to folks across the globe.
Taylor Guitars is now worldwide and will soon be celebrating its 40th anniversary. Taylor makes about 500 guitars a day at its factory in El Cajon and Tecate, Mexico. Electric car company Tesla says a metal object impaled the battery of a burning Model S. Video of the fire went viral, led to a drop in Tesla shares. The company says the car properly contained the fire, and it's something more common, they say, in gas vehicles. The driver was able to get out, but firefighters struggled to extinguish the reigniting flames. President Obama has signed a new law to give special visas to Iraqis who work with U.S. forces. So far, more than 12,000 Iraqi contractors, interpreters, and others have come to the U.S., escaping death threats and targeted killings. Now, the measure extends the visa program. About 2,000 applications are still pending. Tomorrow, immigration reform advocates plan to march from Balboa Park to the County Administration Building downtown. They're doing it to urge Congress to get back to work on immigration reform. Joe Replogel from our Fronteras desk joins us to talk about the march and the prospects for immigration reform. Jill, the weekend march in San Diego, is that only here?
No, there are actually marches and rallies planned in about 150 cities around the country. Immigration reform advocates have been planning this as their big day of action for a few months now. And while they weren't planning on the government shutdown to take the wind out of their sails completely, it was becoming clear by late summer that the enthusiasm and the legislative activity around immigration reform was waning. So this is their big attempt to keep the issue alive.
Right, the partial government shutdown, the next big fight is over the debt ceiling. Is there still any chance the immigration reform bill will get passed this year?
Not much of a chance, but there is a slim chance. Reform advocates seem to be pinning their hopes on a bill that House Democrats presented earlier this week. And that includes a path to citizenship for many people currently in the country illegally, and it would also increase border security. They say if the House of Representatives ultimately compromises on the budget and the debt ceiling and allows a vote on those issues, that could open a window for a vote on immigration reform. And advocates think there would be enough votes in the House to pass the bill and ultimately get it signed by the president.
That is, if the budget fight is settled first. KPBS Fronteras reporter Jill Replogle. Jerry Brown will become the state's longest-serving governor on Monday, with 10 years under his belt if you factor in his 2 terms. Brown was first elected in 1975 at the age of 36 in California. Then again in 2011 when he was 72. Brown says he has no reflections yet on the milestone.
The government shutdown shows no sign of being resolved. Meanwhile, the program it was designed to stop, Obama's health reform, is rolling out this week. I'm Alison St. John. Join us for an analysis of how these stories are affecting San Diego, coming up on the Roundtable tonight at 8:30.
A documentary opening this weekend at the San Diego Film Festival shows how one man living with Parkinson's disease is inspiring others through cycling. Peggy Pico talks with the film's director.
Larry Smith has been living with Parkinson's disease for some 20 years, and in each of those years, his disease has progressed, limiting his physical activity and even his speech. In the new documentary, Ride with Larry, he shares his journey of a 300-mile bicycle ride to inspire and educate others about the disease. Take a look.
I just tell people that give up when you have Parkinson's disease. Keep on living as long as you can.
Here with more about this moving film is the film's director and co-producer, Andrew Rubin. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you.
Andrew, in your film, we experience the daily difficulties through the eyes of Larry here with Parkinson's disease. But this is more than an inspirational film. There's also an underlying story about how this bicycling actually helps Larry physically with the disease. What do doctors say about that?
This was something discovered by accident, and of course I'm not a neurologist or a doctor, but we interviewed some of the experts studying this, and what they found by accident is that when you're pedaling at a certain rate, somehow it's triggering something in the brain that acts in the same way as medication does. So the benefits from cycling for someone with Parkinson's, it's not just about endorphins and exercise, but it's actually doing something to mitigate and to help fight the disease.
Something mechanical happening
Yeah.
in the brain. I have to say, in watching the film, it seems sometimes like this guy cannot catch a break. Here's one more hurdle Larry and his team had to face during their 300-mile ride through South Dakota. Okay, so it's raining, it's,
everything,
difficult. Yeah, tell us about a few more of the difficulties of this ride.
Oh, sure. Well, South Dakota is not San Diego. When we started out, it was pouring rain and gusting winds, and, it was horrible for the filmmakers having to film this. But then you can only imagine what it's like for Larry, who is, has Parkinson's for 20 years on top of this. And really, when he wasn't complaining and he was getting on his bike and he was riding, we sort of had nothing, we had to just stop and film, because how could you complain when
about anything?
Yeah,
exactly.
When he's doing this.
Well, I understand we're seeing him pedal through in this torrential rain, like you said, that is in San Diego. He made several stops during this trip to meet up with other Parkinson's patients. Tell us about some of those that were in the film that he talked to. What was he saying? What was it like?
Well, it was amazing and actually really inspirational, and that's what we're doing with this film as well, is carrying Larry's message forward. He stopped at all these towns along the way, because most people don't know about this and know what's going on, and there's a wonderful foundation, the Davis Finney Foundation, and there's the Parkinson's Association of San Diego that's joining us. And they are educating people, but then it's a whole other thing, and to actually see this in front of your eyes and to see the mobility. And so Larry, actually, we brought a catch-rike, and Parkinson's patients got on it at every stop, and it was quite amazing. People go from immobile to suddenly they're taking off and riding
And
down
at
the
one
street.
point, didn't one person, like, you were a little afraid they weren't going to come back because they were so excited? They kept...
Yeah, he just went down the street and then disappeared and was gone. So
you have a personal connection to this. Your father has Parkinson's. How did that influence your filmmaking?
Well, it's sort of every reason that I did this, and my brother Matt also produced it with me. Everyone that had made this film has Parkinson's in our family. Same with Larry is actually our producer's uncle. But for me, my father's had it for over 10 years, and I see it personally every single day. And to be able to show this not just as a story about Parkinson's, but a story about overcoming Parkinson's, because that's what people who get this diagnosis do. They don't let it take over their life. They see it as a challenge and a challenge to overcome. And so I wanted to make a movie that my father would be proud to see.
Has he seen it yet?
Yes,
he has. Okay, good. This goes beyond Parkinson's, though. You've said that you've wanted to make it for everyone.
Yeah.
What kind of message, and who are you sending it to? Why are you saying this message of hope to whom and how?
Sure. Well, it's definitely not just for Parkinson's. And on the last mile that Larry rode, really everyone came out. There were people with MS and cancer, and because it's really, Larry cherishes life, and it's all about what him and his wife say, that if you love life, you'll fight for it. And that's not something with Parkinson's. That's a message for anyone. That's, you know, there's so many things out there that really can redefine your life. And so, you know, what we want to show is that's possible, and here's how.
Alrighty, San Diego filmmaker Andrew Rubin, thank you so much. Now, you can see the Ride with Larry. It screens at 3:30 this Saturday in the San Diego Film Festival at the ArcLight Theater. For details, go to kpbs.org.
I'm Gwen Eiffel on the next news hour. The virtual currency known as Bitcoins, used around the world to buy real things. Plus, David Brooks and E.J. Dionne. That's Friday on the PBS NewsHour.
How do you put an entire city on a stage? That's what the creators of the play 100% San Diego are doing at the La Jolla Playhouse this weekend. KPBS culture reporter Angela Carone says the 100% series has been done all over the world, but San Diego is the first stop in the U.S.
These 100 people are not actors. In fact, most have never been on a stage before. But over the next couple of days, they will step to the mic at the La Jolla Playhouse and share their personalities,
a big old nerd,
their habits and hobbies.
I love to dance to Louisiana Cajun style. I could dance, so I brought my Monica Carr shirt.
And their opinions.
Hands up who thinks men and women are treated equally in the USA.
They've been cast in a play called 100% San Diego. The 100% series was created by German theater company Rimini Protocol. Helgard Haug is one of the creators.
Well, we were wondering, how can you bring a whole city on stage? And had the idea that we asked 100 people that could represent the whole population.
My name is Andrea Moser.
Moser lives in La Jolla and was the first person cast. But then she had to choose the next cast member from her social circle. He then picked the next cast member and so on, setting off a chain reaction until 100 people were selected. Each cast member had to fit into categories that reflect the demographics of San Diego County, including the youngest among us.
Hi, I'm Isabella. I brought my teddy bear.
Those 100 people on stage, they are mirroring the whole city and the diversity of the city. You see their lives through the way they are answering questions. Like, we ask questions and they show their opinion by going to one side on the stage or the other side.
My wife and I are married. I am in favor of gay marriage.
Haug says at first people were uncomfortable talking about politics.
This project makes people stand for their opinion and, show how different opinions can be, and you actually have to face it.
Leo Molina is in the cast. He's from Escondido. He says answering provocative questions has the cast talking.
You know, we get that question and people start to sort of waffle, try to decide where they fall on it. They end up on one side or the other, but then we feel like we need to justify it. We need to talk about it and sort of say why we feel this way or sort of qualify it a little bit.
Allison Thomas is also in the cast.
Hi, I'm Allison. I practiced law for 15 years, but
but I had a lot to atone for, so now I'm an Episcopal priest.
She says the cast is getting braver with each rehearsal.
But we're also getting more vulnerable as we get to know each other. And towards the end of the show, I mean, I've almost choked up a couple times. People are just so real, and they're really willing to put themselves out there and share their experience. That's very rare.
I was the last one to join this project, so 100% San Diego is complete. We are San Diego.
Angela Carone, KPBS News.
Here now, our 100% San Diego forecast. Temperatures in the 80s along the coast this weekend with some clouds on Sunday. Sunshine in the inland valleys, strong Santa Ana winds. We are also under a red flag warning, until Sunday. Winds in the mountains as well, with temperatures in the 70s, and in the desert, a warm weekend, temperatures in the 90s. You can find tonight's stories, download the KPBS app, all on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. Have a great weekend. Good night.